Hi guys, this is Jasmine Mishra and today I am here with a lecture on poetry of Elizabethan age. Though this age was mainly known for drama, the poetry of this age is not of any less importance. The period of this age was between 1558 to 1603. And it can be subdivided into three main topics: Spencer, university weights, and Shakespeare. But from poetry point of view, only Spencer, Shakespeare, and some other minor poets are important. But let's first talk about the age. The age of Elizabeth is called the Golden Age and also the Age of Renaissance. This is something that many of us would be already knowing, but we also need to know why it was called so. Elizabeth was a very good and smart ruler who knew how to handle political situations. England was very prosperous in those times, so there was prosperity, internal peace, religious and political union, and intense patriotism amongst the countrymen. This all made this age the Golden Age. Now then comes the question, why the age of Renaissance? First of all, you need to understand what Renaissance means. Renaissance literally means rebirth, or the revival of or renewed interest into something. So now, what was the renewed interest into, or what got revived? People had renewed interest into the originals of classics, the age-old classics, which got revived and which came into the hands of common people because of two reasons. First was the role of translations and second was printing press. A lot of classics got translated into vernaculars, so people could read them and benefit from them now. From Latin and Greek, they got translated into English. And then there was this printing press which came to England in 1476. What happens that the handwritten copies become limited in number and can't be available for everyone who wants to read. But printing press diffused the knowledge of the classics and put even Bible in the hands of common people. That became the reason for Renaissance. This was the age in which men lived intensely, thought intensely, and wrote intensely. Guys, now that you understand Renaissance, please try not to confuse it with Reformation. Whenever Renaissance happened in any country, it aroused the aesthetic and intellectual faculties of people through literature and art. While Reformation aroused spiritual faculties. I hope this difference will help you to understand the difference between Chaucer and Wycliffe also. Chaucer was called the morning star of Renaissance because his contributions were made in the field of literature, while Wycliffe and his followers has translated Bible into vernacular and thus making it available for common people to read and understand for themselves. So he was called the morning star of Reformation. Now come back to the age again. First half of Elizabethan age will take from 1558 to 1579. The best poetry that was written in the first half of this age, or between Chaucer's Miscellany and Shepherd's Calendar, was a mirror for magistrates, a collection of poems written by a number of poets. A long series of tragical histories of famous Englishmen. In this book, Thomas Sackville contributed two poems, The Induction and The Complaint of the Duke of Buckingham. which are thought to be superior than any other contributions. It was a kind of continuation to Lydiat's Falls of Princes. I hope you remember from my previous lecture on 15th century literature that Lydiat was an important poet of the school of Chaucer. Now, let's discuss the period between 1579 to 1603. This period is considered as the mid-Renaissance period in which a lot of literary works got written, which survived the test of the time. Now let's discuss Edmund Spenser and his life. He was born in 1552 and died in 1599. He is considered the best poet between Chaucer and Shakespeare. Charles Lamb called him poet's poet. Spenser passed out from Cambridge with help of grants as he was a poor student. He met Leicester in London, and through Leicester's influence he was made secretary to Queen's deputy in Ireland. In Ireland he lived in the castle of Kilcolman. Here he finished 3 books of Faerie Queene and his only prose work, View of the State of Ireland. He died in 1599 after the rebellion of Tyrone. And the conditions of his death, Ben Jonson has said, Spenser died for want of bread. Now, we can take it literally. He might have said it literally, or he might have meant that symbolically, because Spenser lost his property the same year in which he died, but we are not sure whether Ben Jonson meant it literally or not. Spenser is buried in Westminster Abbey beside his master Chaucer. Westminster Abbey's this corner is also called Poets' Corner. Now let's talk about his works. Seyffert's Calendar was his first major work that got published in 1579 and is considered to mark the beginning of real Renaissance in English literature. It is a pastoral poem of artificial kind in 12 parts. Collins's love for Rosalind has been shown in this work. 12 parts are 12 eclogues, wherein each eclogue has been named after a month. An eclogue is a short pastoral poem that is in the form of a dialogue or soliloquy. Spenser has dedicated this work to Sidney, who was a close friend and an important literary personality of that age. Seyffert's Calendar mirrors the style of classical epic poet Virgil. Out of 12 eclogues, 3 eclogues are very important, which are April, May, and December. In April eclogue, a girl called Eliza has been mentioned, who represents Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth is not just mentioned in this song but is also praised, so this song can also be an example of an encomium. An encomium is a prose or poetic work in which a person, thing, or abstract idea is glorified. Spenser has used archaic vocabulary in this work that he borrowed from medieval writers, especially from his beloved master Chaucer. The poem introduces Colin Clout, which is thought to be Spenser himself, a folk character originated by John Skelton. Another important point about this work is that the term sarcasm was first recorded in English in annotations of Seyffert's Calendar. There is a reference of Langland's work Piers the Plowman in the May eclogue, where there is a discussion between Piers and Palinodi, who are ministers of Protestant and Catholic churches respectively. This eclogue has critique of church, while December eclogue is autobiographical in nature. The most well-known work by Spenser on which his fame chiefly depends is Faerie Queene. Faerie Queene is an epic poem allegorical in nature. As per the traditions of epic poem, this also begins in media res. Originally planned as a poem of 24 books, each of which recounting the adventure and triumph of a knight who represented a moral virtue, he could finish only 6. First 3 books got published in 1590, next 3 books got published in 1596, and all 6 with a fragment of 7th in 1609. The immediate model for this book was Orlando Furioso, written by Ariosto. Now for Faerie Queene, Spenser invented a new verse form known as Spencerian Stanza. It was of 9 lines, 8 lines of 5 feet each and 9th line of 6 feet, called an Alexandrine. The rhyming scheme of this was AB, AB, BC, BC, C. Now a little short explanation of the books of Faerie Queene. First book recounts the adventures of Red Cross Knight, which represents holiness, the virtue holiness, and the Lady Una, who represents religion and sometimes Protestant church also. The second book recounts the adventures of Sir Gawain, who represented the virtue temperance. The third book is about Lady Knight Britomartis, who represents chastity. Fourth book is about Sir Tremond and Campbell, and the virtue shown here is friendship. Fifth book is about Sir Artegall, and the virtue is justice. In the sixth book, Sir Calidore appears, and also Colin Clout also briefly appears in this book. Sir Calidore represents the virtue courtesy. Seventh book, which is incomplete, has been titled Two Cantos of Mutability, and the virtue out here can be taken as constancy. Now, as I said, this book is allegorical in nature. So many characters in this book represent real life persons. Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth is represented as almost 3-4 characters, out of which first is Gloriana or the Faerie Queene herself, then Lady Britomartis of book 3, and then in the last 3 books Mercilla appears as Queen Elizabeth, and Belphoebe is also thought to be a representation of Queen Elizabeth herself. Then Sir Redcross and Sir Calidore seems to represent Philip Sidney. Arthur, who is the hero of complete Faerie Queene, is represented by Leicester, and Timaeus is being represented as Raleigh. Now let's discuss some smaller, or you can say less important work by smaller poems or less important work by Spenser. Though from examination point of view they are not less important because they get asked many a time. Epithalamion was published in 1595. We'll discuss some 8-9 works out here, out of which the first one is Epithalamion, which was a wedding song written by Spenser to celebrate his marriage with Elizabeth Boyle. One of the most beautiful wedding hymns in any language. This is thought to be one of the most beautiful wedding hymns in any language, published in 1595. Epithalamion was published with Amoreti in the same volume. Amoreti is a sonnet sequence of 89 sonnets, a sonnet collection written in honor of Elizabeth Boyle, describing Spenser's courtship and eventual marriage to her. It's important to remember about this book that 2 poems are identical out of 89. So there are only 88 unique sonnets in this sonnet collection. Prothelemion was wedding songs written by Spencer in honor of double marriage of Lady Elizabeth and Catherine Somerset, daughters of Earl of Worcester. Guys, please try to remember the difference between epithelemion and prothelemion clearly, as people generally sometimes get confused between these two. Epithelemion he wrote for his own wedding, while prothelemion he wrote for the wedding, double marriage of Lady Elizabeth and Catherine Somerset. Astrophel was a pastoral elegy on the death of Sir Philip Sidney, while 4 hymns was written on love, beauty, heavenly love and heavenly beauty. Then there is a small poem, Colin Clout Comes Home Again. Colin Clout again here represents Spencer symbolically, and it celebrated his arrival in Ireland. Then there is Mother Hubbard's Tale, a long poem which is a satire on society in form of beast fable. Then there is an elegy on Douglas Howard called Daphnida. Daphnida is an elegy closely modeled on Chaucer's Book of Duchess.